First of all, hi, Jared. Welcome.
Hey, glad to be back. Always good to be here to talk about some big tanks full of rather explosive things going really fast.
What do we have going on? Any interesting things happening in space?
Oh yes, I gotta say September was a very interesting month with all of the launches that we got. We could go over them real quick if you'd like to.
All right, just this once.
Okay, all right, sounds good. So I want to start off in Kourou out in French Guiana, where we've got a Ariane 5 from Arianespace launching, carrying Eutelsat Connect. Now, this was a very special communication satellite because the European Space Agency helped develop this with a private company, Eutelsat, and they were doing this to help improve on communication satellites. And I always like to mention that because this is the jungle, the commentators always like to say, there it goes, a little bit of rumble in the jungle for you all with that there. So pretty cool that we were able to get that going. All right. And then, of course, we've got to talk a little bit about a big company here. So if I could get Guacamole to behave with me. You guys might have heard of this small company called SPACEX. They launch a bunch of rockets all the time. And they're having a little bit of a marathon, it seems, this month, where they have had, so far, at least in the past month, since our last beginning of the month, they have done 6 launches. They were going to do a 7th one tonight, but then they had to scrub it. And unfortunately, it looks like it's going to maybe push a little bit more on that. But hey, still 4 Starlinks in 19 days. And then Crew 5 and another Starlink launch on the same day, which they actually set a record for themselves at the time between launches, which for this here, it was 7 hours and 10 minutes between the launch of Crew 5 at Kennedy Space Center in Florida, and then the launch of Starlink 429, which is when we're looking at here out at Vandenberg. So, man, these guys were on top of that and making it happen. And then Elon Musk actually ended up sharing a very interesting video on his Twitter account, which I kind of want to show here. And these are Starlink satellites that are separating in orbit, which is pretty cool. So we'll kind of repeat it a couple times, so you can see what that looks like. So let's try it one more time right here. Look at that. And if you look up at the top right, there's actually a really interesting detail in that. And what I'll do, I'll go ahead and zoom in on it, and you'll see that there is that white dot right there, more towards the left of center. That's the upper stage of the Falcon 9 that delivered this batch of satellites. And watch what it does.
Hey.
It starts to move away very quickly, and that's because it performs its deorbit burn while it's still within view of the cameras on this set of Starlink satellites. So I thought that was really cool. Very rarely do we ever get to actually see rockets in action on orbit, but here you go, everybody. Just an absolutely wild view for them to see. Let's see that one more time. And it kind of shows it gets out of there quick.
Yeah.
Not much more fuel on board, so it can decelerate really fast. Now, we got to go to Corn Ranch in Texas to talk about Blue Origin with their New Shepard rocket flying on the New Shepard 23rd mission on September 12th, because they passed a test that you never want to take, which is they had a problem with the main engine on their New Shepard vehicle. And you can see right there, launch abort system kicks in and pulls the capsule away from a failing booster. Now, there were no people on board of this flight. There's just scientific experiments, but they were able to recover those that were on board of the capsule. Not all of them were able to get through it, but let's take a look here. We'll just kind of slow it down a little bit more. There's the BE-3 engine at the bottom, starting to run a little engine rich, and then finally capsule detects that and sends it away. So like we said, this is a test that you never want to have to take, but if you are going to take this test, you do want to pass it. So it's very good to see this occurred during what's called max Q. This is when you have the maximum amount of aerodynamic pressure on your vehicle. Basically, when you're going through the supersonic region of velocity, the worst possible place to do an abort, and they were able to do so successfully. So very, very nice with that there. Now, I want to move on a little bit and talk about this, which is Soyuz MS-22 launching to the International Space Station and then docking on September 21st. It was carrying 3 astronauts on board, 2 cosmonauts and an American astronaut. The commander, Sergei Prokopyev, also the pilot, Dmitry Petedyan, and then U.S. astronaut Francisco Rubio. Now, what's very interesting about these Soyuz spacecraft, they're very reliable, so they're actually able to rendezvous with the International Space Station rather quickly. And let's take a look at the upper stage shutdown here, and then get a nice view of that upper stage separating from the Soyuz spacecraft as it kind of lets some fuel out and back itself away. So there it goes there, pretty cool. And because the Soyuz are very reliable, it only takes them about 2 orbits or about 3 hours to get to the International Space Station. Several years ago, it would take about 2 to 3 days, but they've been able to improve the software and other things that actually allow the Soyuz to arrive in time. So fantastic to see that they had a successful docking and got those astronauts there. And then we finally say goodbye to an old friend of ours here on the West Coast with the launch of NROL 91 on September 24th from Vandenberg Space Force Base. This was the last flight of a Delta IV Heavy and the last of the Delta series rockets to fly here from the West Coast. This is a classified payload. It is likely a spy satellite, a new version of the electro-optical spy satellites that we use. Essentially, it is a Hubble that does not look outwards, but it looks back down at the Earth. And as you can see, beautiful flight going on here. And as far as we know, from what we've been told, it was a flawless ascent. So they were able to deliver that spy satellite exactly where it needed to go. Now, you may have noticed something on the startup of these engines. That the Delta IV Heavy is pretty well known for, which is that it tends to generate a fireball. And I'm not talking about what you could see right now, where it's just going through the upper atmosphere and boiling off water vapor high up. I'm talking about a big cloud of hydrogen igniting down at the bottom. So there's a great video from Michael Baylor at NASA Spaceflight. We've slowed this down about 50%. These engines that it uses require hydrogen to be pumped through them to speed up the turbines, and then it ignites that hydrogen so that it doesn't go boom on the launch pad. So very important not to allow your rocket to go boom. And then the installation also burns. It's designed to burn like that. So yeah, for overall, absolutely beautiful. And I love those mock diamonds coming out of those engines. It's absolutely fantastic to see that in action. Now, I want to talk a little bit about a new player in the game, which is Firefly Aerospace. They are flying their Alpha SmallSat launch vehicle, and this was their second test flight, which they flew on October 1st. And this ended up being the first successful flight of their Alpha rocket. They attempted to fly it back in September of 2021. It went a little bit off course, and then the flight termination system kicked in. So it's just not good, but hey, it's your first one, you never know. So the second one here looked pretty good overall, and it did end up deploying multiple educational CubeSats into orbit around the Earth. So we can see the second stage firing. You can see the workers from Firefly and Mission Control were a little bit happy when they saw that happen, as I think I would be too. And then a great view from the top of the second stage as we are watching the payload fairing open up, shutting down that engine, and then eventually deploying those CubeSats that we have. for that there. Now, there was something interesting, though, when I went back and rewatched this, when I was kind of building this for tonight's show, and that was that I noticed that the bell on the engine of the second stage actually came really close to impacting the side of the first stage. So I'm going to pull it up here real quick, just to kind of show just how close. I can't really get a good read on it, but I'm willing to say it was inches away from stacking into the second stage. So look at that. Oh, yikes, that is really, really close. Off to the right there, that sort of scattered light you see, that is actually the lights from Santa Barbara down into Malibu into Los Angeles. But yeah, woof, yikes, that was really, really close. Then on October, then just a few days later, we had United Launch Alliance sending up 2 satellites with 1 rocket. You can actually do that. This was on an Atlas V 531, which is a 5-meter payload fairing, the biggest one that they offer. You got 2 satellites, you might have to put the biggest one on there. 3 strap-on solid rocket motors to provide some extra oomph, and then that single engine Centaur upper stage. Now, these 2 satellites, SES-20 and SES-21, they're going to be providing communications coverage for their respective areas. And what was a very unusual thing about this mission is that these satellites were dropped off just under geostationary orbit. Usually you'll launch your satellites into something called a geostationary transfer orbit. Basically, you'll have an orbit that goes close to or even exceeds the geostationary orbital altitude. And then you'll have a part of the orbit that's still relatively close to the Earth, a couple of thousand kilometers near it. But not for this flight. They actually sort of had the upper stage continue after the mission nearly 6 hours after launch, which is a very long time for an upper stage to work, and place those 2 satellites just under geostationary orbit, only by a couple hundred kilometers. It's a pretty impressive performance to be able to do that. And when you do that, you are essentially setting up your satellite to have a very, very long lifespan with it there. And there we could see the Centaur upper stage separating, and then its upper stage engine is going to ignite. So very, very well done by United Launch Alliance there, and they successfully delivered those 2 satellites there. And then we had our Crew 5 mission from SpaceX launching on October 5th. And this is the 5th official crewed flight of a Crew Dragon for NASA, 6th overall, and this was Crew Dragon Endurance's 2nd flight. This is another mission, excuse me, commanded by a rookie astronaut, Nicole Anapu-Man, who is actually the first indigenous woman to fly to space, and ended up finding out that she is brought along a dream catcher that her mother made for her, and she's going to put that in her sleeping quarters. So I thought that was absolutely amazing. She was getting the opportunity to do that. Also had another rookie, Josh Casada, on board as the pilot. And then we had veteran Japanese aerospace exploration astronaut Koichi Wakata, who was on his 5th flight. He's been flying since the inception of the International Space Station back in the late 90s. So very long and storied career. And then we see the booster landing very nicely out on the drone ship in the Atlantic Ocean. And then we also have a Roscosmos cosmonaut on board, Anna Kikina. She is actually the first cosmonaut to fly on a U.S. commercial crew vehicle, and the first cosmonaut to fly at all on an American vehicle in over 20 years. So there we see Crew Dragon Endurance heading off. Now we've got Artemis 1. Gonna want to update you a little bit about that. The testing for the systems that they were having problems with is complete. They did have to delay due to Hurricane Ian, which meant that they had to roll the vehicle back to the vehicle assembly building, and that window, they're going to be aiming for the one that reopens in mid-November, sometime around November 17th. And of course, we'll have another All Space Considered before then, so I'll make sure to update you about the status of this very exciting mission. And then, of course, what is our out to launch without telling all of you who are in the area here in Los Angeles about your Vandenberg Space Force Base launch schedule. Right now, it's a whole bunch of TBAs and no earlier thans with that there, but you're looking at having at least one more Starlink launch out of Vandenberg on October 24th on a SpaceX Falcon 9. On November 1st, JPSS-2, which is going to be a National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration weather satellite. It's going to be launched on the last Atlas V out of Vandenberg. So definitely going to want to go catch that. And then on December 5th, we're going to have another Falcon 9 from SpaceX launching SWAT, which is going to be a mission that studies the oceans. And that is out to launch for September of 2022. Man, October is going to be really, really busy. So here we go again.
Yeah, lots and lots of stuff going on. That's a great report, Jared. Thank you so much for that. And do we have any rockets to look forward to launching from Vandenberg that'll replace the Delta, or are we just losing one of our launch vehicles that we get to see out here?
So we are losing the Delta and the Atlas in the same year, and that hurts my heart because they're both fantastic rockets with great careers that you could trace their lineage all the way back to the ICBMs in the 1950s. Yeah. But yes, they are going to be replaced. United Launch Alliance is developing a rocket right now called Vulcan, which is going to be performing its first flight next year at some point, and it is going to launch from the Atlas V pad at Vandenberg. So we will only be about 3 miles away from it. It won't be like the Delta pad where we were about 8 to 9 miles away, so you didn't really get to experience it all that well. And Vulcan will be pretty good. It's going to have some kick to it, I gotta say. So I'm looking forward to it.
Well, fantastic. Thank you so much for that report.